His work first sought to identify risk factors that could be countered by treatments, in the same way that risk of cardiovascular disease can be countered by treatment for high blood pressure. For the past decade, Dr. Breitner has led the Alzheimer's disease anti-inflammatory prevention trial, I like the acronym ADAPT, one of only a handful of large primary prevention trials designed to test the abilities of specific intervention to reduce the incidence of Alzheimer's disease in elderly persons without dementia. Today, Dr. Breitner will be presenting The Prevention of Alzheimer's Dementia, the Ultimate Cure. I can't wait. Welcome, Dr. Breitner.
Thank you, Corinne, and it's a pleasure to be here. This is my first trip to PEI. I'm an American, transplanted to Montreal for the last 4.5 years, so there's a great deal of this country that I still have to see, including everything outside of Charlottetown in PEI. I want to talk a little bit today about this whole topic of prevention and how I think we may be able to get there from here. And I'm going to need, is this going to advance the slides? No? Okay. What does? Oh, okay. That should do it. All right, so a little bit of history, just for those of you who may not know this. So this unfortunate woman developed dementia at the age of 48 and was taken care of by Dr. Alzheimer himself. And this photograph was taken during her hospital stay. She was 51 when this picture was taken, and she died very shortly thereafter. And it was in examining her brain that and describing the changes there that really brought this disease to light. The fascinating thing about this woman, first of all, is that she actually turned out to suffer from one of the known disease-causing mutations that interferes with amyloid metabolism. So this is a fairly rare form of Alzheimer's disease. It is found, it runs very, very strongly in families. And so she really did have an atypical form of dementia by comparison with most people who develop dementia in later life. The other thing is, I'm a psychiatrist, so I like to quote from Alzheimer's original paper, just so you can see that this is not just an illness that involves memory. Yes, she developed a rapid loss of memory, but the thing that brought her to the hospital was that she developed delusions of jealousy that her husband was actually having an affair, which I think actually was not the case. And then he went on to describe the rest of the problem. And notice the emphasis here on things like language function, when reading skips from line to line or reads by spelling words individually. In writing, she repeats syllables, omits others. Speaking uses gap fills, paraphrased expressions. He gave the example of milk pourer instead of cup. And she no longer remembers the use of some objects. So that's actually a description of what we call today apraxia, which is the loss of a cognitive ability, which translates an intention to do some purposeful movement into the actual sequence of motor tasks that will actually accomplish that. And those of you who take care of folks with Alzheimer's dementia will recognize that symptom probably. So that's just a little bit of history. Now, we know about this. I don't know if I'm going to spend much more time on this. This is the public health urgent priority, that is dementia, and you know that Alzheimer's disease is the leading cause of dementia. I don't get asked as often as I used to, you know, what's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia. I think people have finally caught on that Alzheimer's disease is a disease of the brain and it causes dementia, which is a more global category that can be caused by other things, including vascular problems, as you heard a little while ago. But the really troublesome part here is that with the aging of the population and the age-specific rates not changing very much, I'll come back to that actually, we're looking at a catastrophe in the making here in terms of the burden of dementia cases that we will have to deal with in the coming decades. It's clear that something has to be done. These are just a few statistics. In the United States, by 2050, if rates don't change and prevention isn't available, it's estimated that the cumulative costs of Alzheimer care alone will be equal to the current U.S. government debt of somewhere approaching $20 trillion. That's not sustainable. Something is going to have to happen. So there couldn't be a more urgent priority than trying to learn how to prevent Alzheimer's disease, dementia. Just a few more statistics. By 2050, Chinese population, 24% will be over the age of 65 because they have a very restricted birth policy these days, as you know. There are some 40 million people there today with dementia, and a horrible problem over there. And these numbers that you hear quite often in talks like this, I think it's worth emphasizing that these are projections that are very solidly based, and the reason is that it's already baked in the cake, as they like to say on Wall Street. We know a lot and can project a lot about the numbers of individuals in particular age ranges that we will have in our populations around the world, including particularly in the developing world, where it's a huge, huge problem in the making. And the people, all these people that we're talking about who are going to develop dementia over the next 30 years or 40 years, they're alive today. So we're not speculating here, unless we can do something to prevent it. So how do we think about that? Well, the most important thing, I think, is to realize that Alzheimer's disease is not the same thing as dementia. It's a chronic disease. It's more similar to heart disease and cancer in that there are long phases of activity that affect the end organ, in this instance the brain, that are not yet expressed as symptoms. And in Alzheimer's disease, probably we're on safe grounds now saying that there is evidence of change in the brain extending for 30 years before people actually have the onset of dementia. Now that's kind of scary on the one hand, but it's also a golden opportunity on the other, because you've got 30 years in which to try to do something to alter the course of this disease so that it doesn't end up with the symptoms that are familiar to us. And as we learn more about the biology of the disease, we are going to learn how to prevent or control it. I'm convinced of that. Sometimes people talk about the value of early detection and early intervention, and they wonder why greater efforts aren't being made. And you heard something this morning in the true-false section about the value in this. The fact of the matter is, I think, that when we have more definitive kinds of interventions to offer than we have today, there is going to be even more attention paid to this, and particularly by doctors, who oftentimes are frustrated because of how little the medical profession really has to offer at present in the care of people with this illness. That is to say, we'd like to have a lot more arrows in our quiver than we have today. We're on the verge of an explosion in knowledge about the biology of Alzheimer's disease and the prevention of its symptoms. I was asked on the radio this morning if I had an expectation we would have a meaningful intervention, and I said yes, I think so, probably sometime in the remainder of my lifetime. You can try to figure out how long that will be, because I don't know. Now, number 6 here is really important, and that is that the prevention of Alzheimer's dementia can be achieved without preventing the disease itself. Okay? All you have to do is to intervene in the process of this disease within this long window of opportunity that I was talking about. If only we could figure out how to do that, we'd be halfway there or more. Okay? And so what we need to do is to examine the pre-symptomatic stages of the illness and the biology, as we are trying to do. learn more about it so that we can, and learn what actually makes a difference in the progress at that stage of the illness. And we'll be able to reduce rates of dementia in the same way that we can keep people from dying prematurely of heart attack and stroke, which has been one of the really remarkable triumphs of public health in the last 50 years or so.